And welcome to tonight's Sunday Night SitDown. I am your host this evening, Khari Mosley. So excited to be here for another edition of the Sunday Night SitDown. And as we mentioned in previous episodes, this season is going to be all about sitting down, doing one-on-ones with the candidates who will be asking for your vote in the 2022 midterm elections. And today we have someone who I've known for a very long time, who I have a ton of respect for, who recently announced her candidacy for the seat that is being vacated by Mayor Ed Gainey. You know, we've been talking a lot about this race over the past few weeks. This is going to be one of the most closely watched races of this cycle. And just before we bring Natasha in, just to give you a little bit of a background again, there is some technical differences between a special election and a primary election and a general election. So just to walk everybody through the process of what's happening, it's true in the 24th district, which is the East End and parts of Wilkinsburg, as well as the 19th district, which is the Hill District, North Side, Hazelwood, and some of the Southern Hilltop communities. Former state rep, now Mayor Ed Gainey, and former state rep, now Chief of Staff Jake Wheatley, have both now officially resigned their offices. Obviously, Mayor Gainey earlier in January. This week, Jake Wheatley resigned his seat. And what that does is trigger a special election to identify representatives who will serve the remainder of the term, which is the rest of this calendar year. So there will be a special election on April 5th to decide who will fulfill the remainder of now Mayor Gainey's seat and who will fulfill the remainder of former state representative Jake Wheatley's seat as well. Both of those elections will be happening on April 5th. But we are going through a redistricting process, which we've been talking about a lot as well. And in that redistricting process, new lines will be drawn. And in that process, there will be a primary election that's supposed to be held on May 17th. We hope that will still hold, but there's been a delayed process with getting the maps out. So again, that's just a little bit of background on the process that we're going to go through. A special election on April 5th, a primary election with everybody involved on May 17th, or maybe a later date, depending on when the maps finally get approved and the whole process gets finalized. But with all of that very lengthy civics lesson, it is my true honor to bring on Latasha Mays as our guest on the Sunday Night Sit Down, a candidate in the special election and I believe in the primary for the seat being vacated by Ed Gainey, and that's the State House District 24 in the East End of Pittsburgh. So welcome to the Sunday Night Sit Down, Latasha. So excited to have you on.
Thank you so much, Khari. It's my pleasure to be here with you tonight, and excited for our conversation. This is something I've looked forward to for a long time, given our long history of engaging some of Pittsburgh's most marginalized communities to enter into the center of power in this community and across the state and in this country. So this is going to be really exciting conversation.
Awesome. Yes. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, for the viewers, we're being joined by Latasha Mays, candidate for the State House District 24, the East End of Pittsburgh, the seat that was recently vacated by now Mayor Ed Gainey. So just jumping right into it. A lot of folks in the political circles and activist circles and advocacy circles and policy circles know you very well. I know there's obviously a lot of voters you're going to be introducing yourself to on the East End over these next couple months. What are some of the unique things that you bring to the table that you feel separates you from a field that appears to be growing by the day. I think, when we first booked this, it was 4 candidates, and now there's 6. So in that large field of candidates, what do you feel separates you from the crowd?
And there are a lot of things that separate me. For me, it's important to just establish a little bit of who I am. I don't take it for granted that people know who I am. And so I want to say to all the viewers and listeners out there, my name is Latasha D. Mays. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm a longtime community organizer in Pittsburgh and in this district. And truly, I have been and I am a public servant at heart. And I'm running to disrupt politics as usual. And that's really reflective of who I've been as a local, national, as well as, and particularly a statewide leader for over 22 years. And so that's who I am. Many of you know me from my work as president and CEO of New Voices for Reproductive Justice, which I founded with 3 amazing Black women in 2004. So we are coming up on 18 years we're coming up on 18 years of building the movement for reproductive justice that started right here in Pittsburgh, that has grown and expanded and evolved into a multi-state Rust Belt movement. And so I'm excited and I'm honored to have led the work of New Voices during this time. So in terms of uniqueness, I bring the power of intersectionality. I bring that not only into how I approach my community organizing, I bring all of who I am into anything that I do, my work, my service, and my leadership. And running for elected office, that wouldn't be any different. I'm deeply committed to justice at the places where we are fighting intersectional oppression. I'm bringing the power of intersectionality in how I look at strategy and how I look at institutions and political systems, and how so many issues that are impacting our communities are treated in a silo when they need to be treated at the same time or intersecting with other key issues in not only in 24th district, but in the greater Pittsburgh region. So I am bringing the power of intersectionality. I am a proud Black, lesbian, feminist, cisgender woman. And I'm bringing all that to the table. I'm bringing all of myself to a race that is about the present and future of the 24th district.
Thank you for that. My next question is about your motivation. And as you said, you're someone who is known at the national level, has been, appointed to statewide boards by the governor, as well as, cut your teeth doing local organizing work here in Pittsburgh. Um, you know, you could obviously, continue to do your work at the national level and, be in DC and be in San Francisco and be in New York and meet with funders and do what you've been doing. What has precipitated, you know, um, this direction change from, this what you built over the last 2 decades, to decide that, okay, I'm gonna, take this opportunity and take my experience and go to local office. So what was the motivation that brought you to that decision?
That's a great question. And I just want to note that, running for elected office is a part of my history already. It's a part of my story already. I had the opportunity to run twice. I ran for Democratic Committee in 2006 when I was living in Highland Park. When I moved to Morningside in 2015, I ran for City Council in District 7. And so this is not a new direction for me. I just think that, it is an extension of the work that I've done for these 20 years, largely in my role at New Voices. But this is elected life and electoral justice, as well as political campaigning and organizing. That's been uh, deeply entrenched in my leadership journey. I've worked on many campaigns, from state representative to lieutenant governor. I think you remember that race. I worked on school board races. I worked on the governor's race, and you name it, and you name the level of elected office. I have campaign experience in supporting and leading different aspects of campaigns over many years as well. So I think I'm appreciating this conversation because I feel like people can get to know me, even beyond my work for reproductive justice, which does encompass a lot of key issues. But I have such a deep knowledge and breadth and depth of experience that I'm hoping that people can come to learn and learn in this campaign, and just learn as they learn more about me. And so what really is prompting me to run at this point is that, you know, I've always been an advocate, an organizer, and activist for social justice and social change, including um, racial justice, gender justice, and economic justice. So those things really center and anchor who I am as a leader. And so in any place or space that I am in, where I find myself, I'm bringing all of that to the table. So I tell people as we're out here campaigning, I'm not saying that uh, when I'm elected to represent them, that I'm going to Harrisburg. The way I feel is that we are going to Harrisburg. Those of us who have been on the margins, those of us who feel ignored, those of us who literally, like, the Capitol was not intended for us to be there because of our identity, because of our race or our gender or our orientation or gender expression. Even in those places, we all going to Harrisburg is how I feel. So I feel like that there are so many key issues, key progressive issues, where that fight is in Harrisburg, whether it's reproductive justice, Roe v. Wade, and abortion access, whether it's protecting some of our most vulnerable communities, including youth, LGBTQ folks, and the elderly. That fight is in Harrisburg, as well as the fight of our generation to protect our environment for all people. That fight is in Harrisburg. And so luckily I'm a fighter. And I've worked every single day in this community. Every single day that I've lived in the Pittsburgh community has been dedicated to social justice. It has been dedicated to try to create some type of change, positive change in the lives of those who want and need and desire it most.
Now, thank you so much. But it's just sticking to, with your, experience around reproductive justice, issues, and we are going to move to other issues that are in your wheelhouse. But I do want to just focus a little bit, on your depth of experience, specifically focusing on reproductive justice issues and the betterment of Black women's lives. How do you plan to use your experience specifically in that work as a state representative?
Well, I say that the movement for reproductive justice has prepared me to take on this role, to serve as an elected policymaker and legislator. And here are a few ways that I've been prepared for these decades to on day one, be able to be an effective, principled, and consistent leader in Harrisburg and in the 24th legislative district, on the ground and in all of its important communities. So one, I'm bringing policy expertise. Because of the nature of reproductive justice, it is intersectional. So I've had to learn not only like what we consider core reproductive health and rights policy. I've also had to really deepen my knowledge around other policies, deepen my understanding, like, on so many levels, and how so many forms of oppression work together, just as so many policies work together to either advantage or disadvantage certain communities, our most marginalized communities. So I've developed a policy expertise over these 20 years that is extremely broad, And in some areas, I have great depth, but I definitely have the basics down on so many policy issues. And in my own personal life, while we know policy and politics, you can't learn in a classroom, but I had the opportunity to study public policy and management at Carnegie Mellon University. And, while there were great concepts that I could take and apply to my work, it was what I learned by actually being in Harrisburg as an advocate, as a thought leader, as an organizer that has made a difference. I'm going into Harrisburg with the relationships also on day one, but years of building relationships with not only legislators, but non-elected policymakers who work across different parts of the government, whether it's the Department of State or if it's Department of Public Welfare, or I'm sorry, Department of Human Services. They changed the name some years back, so please forgive me for misspeaking on that. But also relationships from when I worked in state government. I was a legislative aide to former rep Jake Wheatley, as well as my most recent experience as a commissioner in the Governor's Commission on African American Affairs. So those are just like some of the ways that I've been able to build extensive and really long and complex and just very fruitful relationships where I get calls about legislation being introduced from legislators or their staffers or committees, where I'm called upon to stand with the governor when it's time to veto the 6-week abortion ban because of his own commitment to ensuring reproductive justice and abortion access. Where I'm called to speak to stakeholders across the state who are committed to Black maternal health, and speaking with speaking with the leadership in the governor's administration, particularly in the Department of Health, being able to have access to those leaders by virtue of my respected work for 20 plus years is what I'm bringing to the table. So I mentioned some of my previous experiences in state government, power mapping, and that's an organizing term. But we have to bring our skills that we have developed from organizing into political spaces, legislative spaces, and electoral spaces. And I would be bringing that. Power mapping is that's how we win. That's understanding your political landscape and moving your leverage points to actually win concrete changes. And so organizing strategy, I think what I'm able to do is organize in multiple places. In any realm, I see it as an organizing opportunity, a community organizing opportunity. And for me, that's always with those who are first and most impacted by oppression in mind and at the center of anything that I'm doing. And understanding the legislative process is it's the most important process for a legislator, of course, but there's so many other ways to win and move and make concrete changes for our constituents, for those that we serve, for those who come, who seek the help and resources and access to information to their elected officials. There's so many ways that we can have great impact in the lives of those that we serve. And it's not always a legislative victory. It's just by nature, the configuration of the legislature, that isn't the path currently, especially for Democrats. So there's administrative advocacy, there's budgetary advocacy, there's also legal advocacy that can be employed as a part of this, of all the many ways that we can move important issues, move progressive issues in the legislature.
And sticking, with the legislature, sticking with, District 24, moving on to, wider array of issues, what, are some of the issues that we haven't tackled yet in our conversation that you think need to be highlighted, and in ways that you want to use the office, to address those issues?
That's as people, that's what all we have, so many issues, right? So we are always, we're always strategizing around how to win in all the ways that impact uh, the residents of any community. So I do want to, I want to talk about COVID-19. I want to talk about relief and what recovery even looks or feels like as we enter into year 3 of a pandemic, of a global health pandemic that we know disproportionately impacted Black and Brown communities, women and femmes and gender expansive folk, that we know impacted our youth, our elderly, folks with low incomes. We know that COVID only exposed what was already systems and institutions that were failing us. And so COVID only served to expose the insidiousness of all of the oppression that so many people are facing each day. And so when I'm talking about COVID-19 relief, like, just to be clear, we're still in a pandemic. And I think in some ways we act as if we aren't. And I'm not saying that to be flippant. I'm not stating the obvious. I just think the way that we handle, we're handling some critical pieces in our community almost acts as if COVID isn't still in play, that COVID isn't still devastating Black communities in particular. So I speak about this because these past 2 years in leading New Voices, we really had to shift to, direct service, and thinking like, wow, well, we're social justice, activists and change makers and policy advocates. But at the end of the day, people needed their basic needs met. And so what we had to do, and at my direction, was to look at what we could impact, what was already available for people, for those who are living on the margins, what was already available to them during COVID-19, and where was there intersections where there were huge gaps. And so for us, that was diapers and menstrual products. That was free emergency contraception. It was cash grants. It was free laundry services. We hosted a toy drive and distribution. It was so many things. It was so many things that our communities needed. And because of my understanding of intersectionality, we knew we had to meet basic needs before we are asking people to fight for justice. And it's the bread and roses school of thought or concept. We have to make sure people's basic needs are met. And that was essential during COVID. And how do we continue to do that during and beyond COVID? How do we create systems of mutual aid? And because, in some ways, government it should be serving the people, but we know that it doesn't. So in the ways that we can't rely on our government, what other kind of systems can we create? And I'm not just trying to be a part of a government that doesn't adequately serve the people. I'm trying to be part of a government that is responsive, that is part of the landscape and ecosystem that makes sure that those we serve, those that we are called to serve, and have what they need. And that I want to be a part of that. And that's almost a continuing of the role that I have been playing for so many years. Childcare, housing, education, the rights of workers in general, but essential workers, especially when we're talking about the very front lines, but in terms of nurses, who are really fighting this COVID-19 battle. When it comes to small businesses, their ability to survive during COVID, like, these are all issues that are of great concern to me. And for me, it is one of my core platform issues. But you see, I'm talking about it in an intersectional way. There's also millions of dollars coming to our community through the American Rescue Plan, and how making sure that the ways that that money was distributed, both to the county and to the city, is distributed how it was intended, that it's accountable and that it's transparent. And that those dollars are going to impact the communities of the 24th legislative district. So I don't want to keep going because I could, but COVID-19 I think is really sent front and center for me, and it encompasses so many other related and intersectional policy issues.
Thank you so much. I just have a couple more questions, and one of them is a conversation that's gone on a lot, here in the Pittsburgh region. A question about the kind of built-in racial inequity within the Pittsburgh region. What are your thoughts about how you can play a role in addressing the systemic inequities within our region, as a state legislator?
Well, a state legislator is like any other concerned community member, and you have influence to either make legislative or policy changes or the other forms of advocacy that I've mentioned already. But you are a thought leader. You have a platform that is greater than so many other, like, people who are living and working, trying to make ends meet, trying to live their lives. State legislators have a platform. And so I'm always, as I have done already, I'm always going to use that platform to talk about justice, to talk about change, to talk about in structural racism, talk about the intersection of race and sexism, racism and sexism, or misogynoir. Like, I'm always going to be using my platform in a way that's elevating where we are missing the mark around, making the city, making our city and region livable for all people. Not even most livable, just livable. Would be great. A great start is that everybody has equal social, economic, and political opportunity. So I think thought leadership and using platforms is always the way. But for me, I'm about collaboration and solutions. So I am not one to talk. I think anybody who knows me in my work, I get the job done, no matter what it is. I can get the job done because of my relationship, because of my background and expertise, because of my leadership, because of my long history in this community, to be able to actually come up with real solutions. And if there's dollars or funding needed for those solutions, to be able to really lean on my decades of fundraising, if needed. If we aren't able to get allocations in our budget, that's not the only source of funding. While we always want to see equitable budgeting in the state budget, I think we have to be more open to how we can actually accomplish the things that we want to see. If we always stick to the current strategy and playbook, we may never have the opportunity to win the game. We have to be more original and more creative and more intersectional and innovative in our thinking. And so for me, I'm bringing that. I'm bringing a fresh perspective, Khari. I'm bringing a bold vision for change. And that is what fuels and motivates me every single day. I think you remember when the report came out from the City of Pittsburgh Gender Commission. New Voices, first of all, I want to say, was instrumental in the creation of that commission. So we were deeply disappointed to see research that was really about that. It was telling a story without having the people who lived the experience to tell our own story. So there is not just numbers, it's people. It's not just statistics, it's real life. And so what we felt was lacking, and not only me and other leaders, Black women leaders in this community, we called that report out because we didn't feel that we felt that it was another way to exploit the lived experiences of Black women and folks. And so for me, I'm never going to sit there and not speak the truth or not speak about justice or not speak for power for those who may not be able to speak that for themselves. And that my ability to organize people in any situation, in any realm, is the greatest skill that I'm bringing to the table.
Thank you so much for that. I have one quick question before we get into housekeeping, and the question is, you, like you said, you have a reputation, for getting the job done. But as if you are elected to the House of Representatives, you'll be one of 203. So how will you balance, um, you know, your your sense of your own expectations, and your own assertive nature to get things done, with obviously the sausage making, the very slow process that can be the legislative process, and keeping your constituency engaged, that oftentimes, as we see at the federal level, gets very frustrated when the legislative process doesn't work as efficiently as one would hope.
Well, I will start by saying that I've been on the side of pushing for change and not feeling like things were moving quickly enough. So I understand that perspective first and foremost. What I've come to learn in my work, my leadership, my service to this community is that the change that we want to see, we want immediate change. We want it now, right? That's always our posture. I'm here for all of that. And I also know how government works at a glacial pace. I know that the victories that we want to see, we don't always get them full stop. It comes in phases and waves. So I think the way to keep people engaged is for them to be part of the solutions when we're strategizing around the politics of specific issues. So I always feel and have to believe that there's always a win to be had. And so how do we build upon the wins to have the great victories that we always are seeking? Because nothing that has ever been accomplished happened overnight. It never has been that way. It's always been years in the making. And so we see that we're in a time where we've elected our first Black mayor. But guess what? That day, that moment was possible because of generations of organizing by the greats from our community. And of course, I have to mention and honor Alma Speed Fox, who for 70 years worked to organize in this community as a Black woman in the 1950s and 60s, taking on large institutions so bravely, so unapologetically, but she was clear about what she wanted to do. And so I think that we have to understand that some things can happen quickly. Some things take a more moderate pace, and some things are slower than we could ever hope or dream. And so where do we want to move the needle on certain issues or certain aspects of the victory we're trying to achieve? What are things that can happen today? For example, incarcerated women and birthing folks were being shackled. They were being shackled during pregnancy in the Allegheny County Jail. This was going on for years. And you know what needed to change, Khari? It was a policy around transporting inmates. And with one change in policy, and you had to do training, and you had to have accountability, but we were able to end that practice right here in Allegheny County. Now, that practice still happens. I want to be very clear about that. Even with victories, you still have to make sure there's accountability. So it's, shackling is still happening in the county jail. Even when I and others helped to pass statewide legislation to end shackling of pregnant incarcerated folks, it was doing up to a certain part in the birthing process or a certain trimester. And so that means that even when we win policy, it's not always perfect. That policy or piece of legislation is always negotiated. So you have to come back and push for even stronger policy. So I know that legislation and policy is part of a broader political advocacy organizing landscape to get to the ultimate goals that we want to see, especially around defeating white supremacy and patriarchal violence. So I think we have to give people a fuller picture and really change expectations about, we want our institutions to be accountable, and we have to be able to know where our leverage points are. And I think that's we have to have a more complicated approach to how to win change.
Thank you so much. And can you please share with our viewers and listeners how they can learn more about you and how they can get in touch with your campaign?
Well, thank you so much, Khari. You can follow me at Latasha for PA on social, and latasha4pa.com is my website for my campaign. If you're looking for my other pages, DUXFEMFAC, Dux Femme Fac, on Instagram and Twitter.
Thanks so much for that. And our final question, we call this the miracle question. We always try to end on a positive vibe. Tell us what brings you joy.
Well, some of you may know, some of you may not know, but I love music, and I actually DJ. I go by DJ Dark and Stormy, and so I do it. It's purely for my own joy, my own Black joy. I don't. It's not something I do professionally, but it is a hobby. As organizers, activists, those of us committed to justice and social change, it's consuming because it's our passion. It's the work that we love. But I had to find balance, especially because our work is nonstop. So I had to find things that help to not only bring balance, but to take me into a different realm and not always have your mind thinking about how we're going to strategize for this, how we're going to win for that. Like, how can we actually just chill out sometimes? How can we relax? How can we have self-care? But how can we have joy more than anything? And so DJing brings me joy. It's like the one thing that I do where I don't think about anything else. And so you might catch DJ Dark and Stormy on the campaign trail, just to put that out there.
That's what's up. Thank you so much for joining us, Latasha Mays, candidate for the Pennsylvania State House District 24 here tonight on the Sunday Night Sit Down. Thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck on the campaign trail. We will definitely be in touch and look forward to contacting you and the other candidates for our upcoming candidate forum. But until then, again, best of luck and looking forward to talking to you very soon.
Thank you so much, Khari. Thank you to One Hood Power. It's my honor to be here tonight, and I look forward. I'm excited and energized by the opportunity to serve as the next state representative for the 24th Legislative District. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. And that was Latasha Mays, candidate for the Pennsylvania State House in District 24. That was tonight's Sunday Night Sit Down. Thank you so much for joining us. Tomorrow night, we have another very, very important episode, which is a great segue from the conversation that we just had with Latasha Mays. We will be doing a special preview of both special elections that will be happening in Western Pennsylvania. We have Chris Potter from WESA. We have Ryan Dito, formerly of the Pittsburgh City Paper, now with the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, and David Dix, a Harrisburg-based campaign consultant and government relations specialist. So we're very, very, very excited about talking about all the candidates running in the 19th Legislative District, all the candidates running in the 24th Legislative District for those two special elections that will be held on April 5th, 2020. So please join us tomorrow night for the One Hood Power Hour, where again, we will be talking all about the special elections happening on April 5th. Until then, have a great night. Thank you so much for joining us for the Sunday Night Sit Down. For One Hood Power, this is Khari Mosley. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.